Okay. Yeah, working. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to do a presentation today to you about global shipping and logistics. As you can see, I don't have a Scottish accent. My name is not James Bryson. James Bryson, unfortunately, due to personal reasons, cannot be here today. So I'm taking over the presentation and discuss a few topics about shipping to you or with you. So I'm basically talking about the market situation and why strong attention even to the boardrooms now. A few words about myself. My name is Stephan. I'm originally from Cologne in Germany, and I've been in the shipping industry for, I would say now, 20 years. I've started in a small, tiny company in Mexico producing tequila, mezcal, rum. So I know basically how producers work. Have lived in Mexico for 10 years, and then I returned back to Germany, and I'm in the logistics, wine logistics industry since 8 years in Germany now. So a quick introduction about VinLog. You can see up here, VinLog powered by Kühn + Nagel. For those who don't know who or what VinLog is basically the specialist beverage division of Kühn + Nagel, which some of you might know as K&N Drinks. In the past, it was called K&N Drinks Logistics, and we changed to VinLog in 2019. So we basically have a global network of offices within the beer, wine, spirits industry in all major locations and offer full container shipping, less than full container shipping for cased goods, and well, most importantly for you, bulk shipments in flexi tanks predominantly. And we do believe that no one single customer is the same, and our mission is basically to listen, understand, and adapt to the needs of the customer whilst benefiting from the global network of Kühn + Nagel, which is the #1 freight forwarder. So, but we ultimately believe that a freight forwarder should not only be a facilitator of exports and imports, but be a supply chain specialist and help and educate, support, and protect our customers' valuable supply chain. And this is why I'm doing the presentation today, basically to give you an insight what has been happening in the shipping industry. So having a look at the brief agenda we have today, it's basically having a look from backroom to boardroom, do a short reflection on how we went there, look at the current situation of the market, try to give an outlook, and then do a summary what might be or could be the new normal of shipping and global logistics. So throughout the turmoil of the last 2 years, we've been found that logistical challenges have risen to the forefront of many discussions. And it used to be a kind of brief consideration. You might all know that logistics was a kind of topic, well, it need to work, and all people working in logistics in the companies had to just assure that the containers arrived, and it went quite smoothly. But within the last 2 years, situation totally changed, and executives and top management out of a sudden, or not out of a sudden, because of severe delays and cost increases, became interested in looking deeper into it. What's the reason behind these problems? So over the last year, we have performed many of these presentations, looking at the real meaning behind the destabilization and addressing not only how we can help to support, but what can we take and learn from such a shipping dynamic. So within today's presentation, we want to reflect on the trade challenges to date, the impact to both service and rates, current situation within the market, and the outlook moving forward. So we want to offer an insight within these slides as how we can collectively start to align as an industry to ensure no matter what comes ahead, we can at least assume a collective perspective in protecting the customer's supply chain. So ultimately, we can only intelligently predict what a new normal will be or look like using data and embedding the political and economic dynamics. However, we all know that it could just take another case like the Suez Canal blocking, another COVID outbreak, escalating political and economic developments to imbalance the already delicate infrastructure we have. So I want to start with a brief reflection because it seems very strange that at the beginning of the year we were still in the throes of space, equipment, service issues, as you all know. So it was very, very difficult to find space, to find empty containers, to be able to get on board on time and have a reliable supply chain working on. So I think it's important to briefly reflect where the challenges were, and we all want to look forward into the future. So I promise the reflection will be basically a short reflection, ideally. So I have a graph here, which is basically showing you the global container traded volume from 2019 to 2022. And the purpose is basically to show you the key elements or the key moments within the last 2 years, which basically disrupted the market and where we're now. So you can see here that this slide, it proposes a monthly trend of millions of TEU, which is 20-foot container units, transported globally. So as you can see where we're now, here we are. So at the end you can see the red dot, which is I think September or August numbers, no, September numbers. So you can see that the volume shipped in September 22 is less than the volume shipped in September in the last 4 years. So volumes, you can see, shipped on a global scale are declining. So having a look at this graph, you can see 2019, and 2019 is basically the last year which we can find as a normal shipping situation, where you can see on the global scale the typical trend we are all used to, or we have been used to in the medium past. So you have a strong January, which strong volumes being shipped, followed by declining February, because you usually have the Chinese New Year in February. Then you have a spring recovery and a sort of permanent stability within ups and downs linked to seasonalities and holidays. So this is basically 2019, how the world used to be in the past, with the kind of global normal shipping pattern. Then at the beginning of 2020, the pandemic, we had the pandemic outbreak and China went into a lockdown and the world basically stopped. So you can see volumes dropping here down to levels of 9 million TEU shipped in 1 month, which is basically a full stop. Then basically equally unexpectedly, there was a rapid rise and a recovery and a rebound that brought transport to monthly levels never seen before, which is basically 2020, where numbers are rising. And then we had a short decline with the Delta Corona variant, which contributed to a slowdown at the beginning of 2021. But then we had this vaccination impulse and volumes recovered, and it reached levels in 2021, if you take the whole year, which was a record year in history with the largest number of containers ever shipped. So this was combined with a vast upsurge in consumer spending, especially in the US, due to financial stimuluses. And this situation created an impact on volume, a lot of pressure on port infrastructure, inland transport infrastructure, availability of truckers, and it led to vessel delays, schedule disruption, container shortages, etc. So this is how we come to this difficult situation where you had record numbers of containers to be shipped, reliability of schedules going down, and basically a very, very challenging situation in 2021. So then we reached 2022, beginning of this year, and we had the outbreak of war in Ukraine immediately after Chinese New Year. So you can see numbers here, beginning of 2021 really starting to decline rapidly. Then we had, after Chinese New Year, a slight recovery in March, April, May, which was still strong. But after that, global container volumes to be shipped or shipped basically start declining. So you can see numbers going down to the September numbers, which have been basically the lowest one in the last 4 years, comparing September. And the outlook for the existing month, where we're right now in November and December, do not look pretty much better today. So it's definitely a fall in volumes and a difficult situation, but it's not a totally free fall. So you cannot say that this is happening on all trade lanes in the same manner. So for example, imports to the US east coast of the United States, they continue to be strong, with the port of New York recording the 4th busiest month ever for container volumes handled in August. So New York volumes year to date increased by 10%, and more containers were imported through New York in August than through the port of Los Angeles, which is basically the most important port in the US. And we see some rapidly growing product categories, such as shipments linked to projects for construction, alternative energy plants, wind, solar, hydroelectronic. So there's still some product to be shipped. What's important, and where we have started, I hope these, What we've mentioned already is schedule reliability, and I think this graph shows basically how global congestion has been improving and schedule reliability is recovering. So you can see, if you have a look at 2021, schedule reliability was down to 36, slightly rising 40%, 35%, which is basically going down up to 34%. The blue line, the light blue line, is it? 2021. So, I mean, if you talk about schedule reliability of 34%, it's basically no reliability. If you want to have your supply chain in order, you don't know if the vessel is arriving on time. So this was record low numbers. Basically, how was this happening, or how supply chain were disrupted? You need to consider blank sailings, port congestion, inland transport infrastructure basically not working properly. And all these factors led to low schedule reliability. Now, as we said, volumes are slightly reducing. They are basically dropping out of China. So these factors help to ease global congestion, and less demand helps to clear up the backlogs at the ports. And looking at September numbers, we have a improvement of schedule reliability, and the indicator of reliability has now risen to 56%, which is a number not seen in 2 years. So we can see a slight improvement. Well, I would say good improvement is more than 50%. Having suffered for the last 3 years, I think it's a good number, and we hope that this will improve in the next month. Now, talking about global rate levels and put them into perspective, for those that are familiar with the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index, it's an index where the price of 40-foot containers is put into perspective, and an index to the 9 major export routes out of Shanghai. And this is basically a rate level or index level, which you can see was pondering around on $2,000 levels, slightly going down, but basically it was stable. And then we had a sharp uplift up to the record level of $10,200 in January 22. So it's a heavy increase of cost for logistics and for shipping out of Asia. And then you can see a strong decline starting this year. And now these 10,200 of the index are at the level of 3,800, which is basically a 60% reduction. So in most industries, if you imagine other industries, it would be a disaster if a major earnings index collapsed by half in less than 3 quarters. So it's basically free falling. But here we're talking about container shipping, where rates have reached stratospheric levels during the course of the pandemic. So despite the recent sharp decline, current rates are still 3 times the average levels between 2015 and 2019. So rates are going down, but they are still way above the average level of the past years since 2014, as you can see here. So this basically is a reflection. Now let's try to have a look where we're now and what the current situation looks now. So this is basically something we use at Kühne + Nagel or at VinLog with our platform Sea Explorer. We have something called the disruption indicator. And the disruption indicator confirms, as you can see here as well, encouraging signs of recovery. The disruption indicator is monitoring the life progress of global vessels and their discharge. So they look how many vessels are waiting in front of major ports, put into perspective how much TEUs are basically waiting, are not available for shipping, and then make an index and see how this is developing. And you can see a record high in Q1 of this year, where it was at 60 million TEU, and now it's going down to 5 million TEU waiting time. So basically this shows that congestion at the major ports is easing up. Vessels are not waiting any longer. Schedule reliability is going back, it's improving. So this is really, really important that congestion is easing up, because it's very important that it was congestion that took so much capacity out of the market. I mean, you got a certain amount of TEU available, vessel space available, but if you have vessels waiting in front of container ports, it's basically not available to be discharged and reloaded, and you took capacity out of the market. So it highest times it was up to 10% of the global market, which was somewhere waiting. So congestion was really a major issue, and the congestion led to freight rates going up to these extraordinary levels. Now with fewer ships waiting in ports, this means more ships are on the water, more space for shippers who now have more choices again about where and how to place their cargo. So we have another graph here where you can see this, which is basically loading factors. So we are measuring something which is called the average utilization rate of vessels, and this indicator is falling as well. So you can see an average utilization rate of vessels have been 100% up to 120% throughout the whole year 2021, is now falling. So you can see 78% on the trade lane Asia to Europe, 85% Asia to the US, and estimates for July, August are even lower. So these are numbers of the latest survey available, but you can see, well, graphically displayed that there's more space available. Vessels are not fully utilized at the moment. So carriers need to respond to this situation, and what they do is usually, as space is now increasing, space availability is increasing, so they start cutting spot prices, which we have seen as well in the SCFI, the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index, that is reducing. So if you now book on a spot rate from Asia to the US or from Asia to Europe, rates are basically way below the currently experienced levels. So what are shipping lines doing? They will implement countermeasures to adjust their fleet to the new level of demand. So they basically need to prevent overcapacity from falling back to the uneconomic levels of a few years ago. So we have heard already some steamship lines or some alliances reporting to slow speed, have vessels moving slower to cut fuel costs and reduce their cost levels. So having another look at the components of the supply of the Shanghai Containerized Freight Index shows that basically all markets are starting to follow the same downward trend, meaning rates are softening. So, excuse me. So it's important to qualify that this still remains above these 2015 to 2019 levels. And depending on the future markets and dynamics, the economic impact, it will depend basically where the rate will be in the first quarter of 23. Sorry. So you can see here basically the major routes from Asia to the US West Coast, US East Coast, Oceania, North Europe. And the scheme is basically similar on all major trade lanes. So rates are reducing. So this slide is basically showing you inflation rates on a worldwide level. And why do we see this development right now? So container shipping, of course, does not live outside the economies it serves. And 2020 and 2021, we had incentives associated with the COVID outbreak and the COVID pandemic, and it basically consumer behavior and spending was encouraged, and consumer spending was high. Oh, sorry, just excuse me. So consumer spending was very, very high. And now 2022 shows a totally different economic environment, and a new dynamic has emerged. First, the easing of pandemic-related restriction boosted the significant return of spending on travel, services, tourism, holidays, etc. I don't know what you did, but after a COVID lockdown, just sitting at home, now it was possible to travel again, to spend your money on different things than goods. So basically what happened is you started to travel again, you spent on holidays, etc. But at the same time, inflation is now more than 10% in all major economies. I just heard yesterday in the Netherlands we're at 14%, Germany is 10%, so inflation is rising everywhere. Then we had war, the energy crisis, interest rates and geopolitical tensions have led to further consumer distrust. So we're really living in a difficult world right now. And classical economics say that when inflation is high, which we have right now, interest rates rise, which we're seeing as well, spending falls, which we have seen, and the economy cools down and demand falls. And this is basically what happened on a global scale. Purchases quickly collapsed, and Western companies with high inventories and warehouses full of unsold goods had to immediately curb and some even suspend their orders. So warehouses are full and companies start to reduce orders. So now in this difficult situation, we continue to wait for signs that we can hope for a reversal of this difficult trend. But basically we're living in an economic situation right now where demand is falling, and which basically explains why there's less demand for container shipping. So what's the outlook? What will happen? What will alliances, what will steamship lines do? Will rates further fall? What might happen in the market? So I find on this slide it's interesting to see how the alliances or steamship lines currently situation, how it is displayed. And we must not forget that today 85% of the world fleet is basically controlled by only 10 shipping companies. So you can see here the overall volume or availability of containers to be shipped is 25 million. So 25 million and 65% are these 5 steamship lines down there. And you got 10 shipping lines basically covering 85% of the market. And they are in these 3 alliances, and they do vessel sharing, share the main services, spaces. So these 10 companies are grouped. And in such a consolidated environment, this of course offers greater guarantees for easy and quick implementation of countermeasures, so they can easily react. So for an example, when the pandemic hit at the beginning and volumes fell by 20% because we had this drop, as we have seen on one of the earlier slides, steamship lines were able really to move harmoniously and were able to maintain transport prices at pre-pandemic levels. So this just to indicate we're living in a very consolidated market where shipping options are not as vast as they used to be, as you can see in 1996, where basically the top 5 carriers only had 75% of the market. So there's a consolidation of power in the shipping industry. So what will happen? This is a slide which shows supply developments and the order book. The order book means what are steamship lines ordering of new vessels, how this will develop. And you can see here that we have a total of almost 7 million TEU of new ships currently on the order. So the ratio of orders on hand to current capacity is almost 30%. So as you can see here, most orders were placed in 2021. At the beginning, the blue big column with 4.7 million. So most orders were placed in 2021, which was a record year for shipping companies, not only in terms of profits, but also in terms of orders. If you have seen, or if you remember the slide where we have seen the record number of containers to be shipped, of TEU to be shipped. So steamship lines needed to respond, so they start ordering, fill the order book, and so in theory you have a capacity of 7 million TEU to be expected to push into the market. So this new capacity will emerge. However, most of it is entering until 2024 or 2025 because these ships need to be produced and constructed. So carriers now need to make sure that with the new order book, countermeasures will be made to balance supply and demand again. Because if you would have these 7 million TEU coming into the market, you have an overcapacity again, and freight levels, profitability might be reduced. So they take countermeasures to have not an overcapacity in the market again. So this is one immediate countermeasure. This is just an example of what steamship lines are doing and can do. So one countermeasure is the so-called blanking activity. I don't know if you've heard of blanking. For sure you might have heard of blanking or blank sailing, like it is called. So blank sailing is removing some arrivals and departures from the schedule, and through this carriers avoid ports, allow demand to increase before the next call. So this is a widespread practice that also supports restoration of schedule integrity. So this is an example on this slide where you can see the world's top 4 trade lanes, and capacity is currently down by 14% to 27% respectively. So carriers are omitting ports. They are basically having blank sailing activities to respond to the falling demand. But this measure, of course, does not noticeably reduce capacity. So this is an interesting slide. I will leave it there for a moment. You can have a closer look and see. So basically the darker blue line here is showing how container throughput is developing. So what's being shipped by the overall worldwide production. So you can see the throughput is rising, or has been rising up to 7%. And the estimates say that the global throughput will be 3% growth for the next 4 to 5 years, which would be this line here. And then the growth in supply, which would be the 7 million additional TEU, which we have already seen, will be very high. And this would be the light blue number. So you would see, if everything continues as it is right now, the supply of the world capacity in 2 years, in 2025, would be way above the container throughput, which is estimated. So for sure, this needs to be adjusted by the steamship lines and be adapted to the most updated demand levels. So steamship lines will see if they remove vessels from sailing schedules just to adapt. So you get this dotted line, the red dotted line, which is estimated to be in an equal level of supply of demand, basically. Then one additional point, which is, I think, important for the current situation of the shipping industry, environmental regulatory timeline, which is basically talking about environmental protection. So you got the IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, and the goal of the IMO is to reduce greenhouse gases basically by 40% until 2030, and subsequently by another 50% until 2050. Like basically everywhere in the world, industries search for reducing carbon emission. So these are new rules which will apply for steamship line. And let's not forget that the market dynamics will also be impacted by sustainability within the market. So this means carriers will reduce their power to mitigate any increases in CO2. And as a consequence, more ships will be required to facilitate the same schedules. So steamship lines need to comply with these regulatory guidelines. So they will start to slow speed, put in more ships in the same services. And basically, all customers, or all shipping customers as well, need to start and comply with these rules, maybe using more biofuel, offsetting, and which are basically the very important topics nowadays. So this is basically the situation where we are in. And well, this is a slide I don't like, but I still have to put it on. I don't know if you've heard in the media that Guangzhou in China has a total lockdown right now. So this is something which is still hovering above us and which can bring us back and disrupt supply chains again. So even after 2 years, pandemic is not over, and it still remains the greatest threat to the recovery of normal services from container lines. So even a short lockdown in China's factories and warehouses can be enough to further disrupt sailing activities and sailing schedules again. So any forecast we are trying to give here of a slight recovery could fall victim to further outbreaks. So in conclusion, where might be the new normal? So in summary, basically no valid and reputable prediction can be made at this time as to when the current situation will resolve and how. We believe that the long-awaited normalization of the container market is on its way, albeit with many ups and downs. The current low congestion, which we have seen, mean more stability, more predictability, less congestion, and definitely more reliability. So again, we must be aware that it is difficult to make a serious forecast or prediction at this point, but recent history, volatility, and the unpredictability of events have shown us how quickly and radically things can change. Rates, I must say, are unlikely to return to the uneconomic levels responsible for carrier losses, consolidation, bankruptcies, mergers, acquisitions, etc. So much will depend on the effectiveness of the measures that carriers will take. So what do we learn from this, and how could we sum up what has been said and shown? Jim put here in his presentation, or I just use it as well, he's citing Jacob Bernoulli, who's a mathematician, and he says it is utterly implausible that a mathematical formula should make the future known to us, and those who think it can would once have believed in witchcraft. So what can we say, or what's the point of this statement is basically that there's one thing we have learned through the good and turbulent times, that whilst the rate is softening, we should discourage working towards the lowest common rate denominator, and that to protect supply chains, we must always be and find a balance. As a professional freight forwarder, our role is to guide and support our customers with independent and clear market intelligence that will help guide them through the variables ahead. As the market softens, space becomes available, carriers will start to implement countermeasures to maintain the supply and demand principle. Notwithstanding the common legislative measures, possible COVID challenges are never sure that the new normal will mean it is important more than ever to maintain shipping-related intelligence at the heart of customers' discussions, to activate the correct decisions for customer supply chains. So what we want to say is basically we as a freight forwarder, or with the freight forwarding companies you're working with, you need to be very much aligned, look into the intelligent data they have available, we have available, and really on a close communication basis, find solutions for your supply chains. So this is basically the quick overview about the global shipping industry, trying to give a short outlook, what is expecting us, and if you have any questions, I don't know, time-wise, we have still some time, we could take some questions, yeah.
Any questions? You told them all, it seems.
No, I'm pretty much aware. It's a lot of slides. It's a lot of information which you need to digest. So if you have any questions, if you want to go back to one or the other point, we still have our booth over there in C01, so you can approach C04. So you can approach me anytime and have a discussion with me and my colleagues. If there are any questions, we can take them now, or otherwise we can do it on a bilateral basis.
Anyway, I would like to say thank you very, very much for your concentrated overview of the current situation, the evolution in the last 2 years especially, and I would say a slightly positive outlook, if I understood well.
Yes, I would agree to that. Yeah, definitely. It's a slightly positive outlook. I'm pretty sure, as we've said, reliability is getting better. Rate levels will never, ever drop to the really, really low levels, but I think we can look optimistic in the future that it will be better, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much.